The hum of the ship's engines was almost imperceptible, a low drone beneath the pulse of her own thoughts. Captain Mira Sato stood before the viewscreen, her fingers grazing the cold surface of the command console as she stared into the black abyss of space. Out here, there was only silence. Her ship, the Vanguard, sliced through the stars with a purpose. It had been a month since the Galactic Elite's decree had reached the human colonies scattered across the galaxy. A month since they had learned the truth: humans were no longer welcome in the war. The elite, in their infinite wisdom, had decided that humanity's presence on the front lines of the galaxy's most brutal conflict was too much of a risk. Not just to the war effort, but to the fragile balance of the galaxy itself. A glance at her crew, young, eager faces all, told a different story. They had been raised on legends of humanity's resilience, its raw power, its unpredictable brilliance. But now, even they were starting to question the wisdom of those who had sent them here. To fight. To win. Or die trying. Captain! Lieutenant Jax's voice broke through her thoughts. He stood behind her, his expression unreadable as he studied the flickering readouts on his console. Mira turned to face him, her violet eyes sharp as ever. She had long ago learned to wear her pain like armor, to mask the cracks in her spirit with the cold precision of a leader. She'd led the human fleet into battle countless times, each victory another testament to the spirit of mankind. But now, after the ban, every triumph felt hollow. The questions in her mind, why? Why now? Had only grown more insistent. Jax hesitated for a moment before speaking. You're quiet today, Captain. Is everything fine? She interrupted, her voice clipped. She gave him a tight smile, the kind that didn't reach her eyes. Everything is fine, Lieutenant. Just thinking. But the truth was far from that. The recent order from the Galactic Elite had shaken her in a way she hadn't expected. She had served in their ranks, earned their respect, fought with the best soldiers in the galaxy, but it wasn't enough. Apparently, nothing was. It didn't matter how many battles they won or how many lives they saved. Humanity had become unpredictable. Too volatile, they said. Too dangerous. A crackling sound suddenly filled the silence of the bridge, and Myra's heart skipped a beat. The transmission. It was from command. Captain Sato. The voice on the other end was distorted, but Mira recognized the clipped tones of Admiral Kessler. We've received new orders. You are to report to the sector immediately. The situation has escalated. What situation? Mira asked, the sharpness in her voice belying the uncertainty gnawing at her insides. There's been a breach, Kessler continued, his voice lowering. A rogue faction of humans has ignored the ban. They're attacking a civilian convoy. We need you to handle this. A rogue faction? The word made Myra's stomach twist. She knew what this meant. Some humans, frustrated by their inability to fight for their own survival, had gone rogue. Without the support of the Galactic Elite, they had resorted to desperate measures, violence. What do you need me to do, Admiral? She kept her voice steady, though inside, her thoughts were spiraling. We need you to engage them, Captain. Show them that the ban is absolute. The rest of humanity must understand their place. Myra's hands clenched into fists at her sides. The ban was absolute. It was a message, not just to the rogue humans, but to everyone who still believed that humanity could stand toe-to-toe with the galaxy's most powerful species. The elite were afraid of humanity. They were afraid of what humans could become. Yes, Admiral, she said coldly, her voice betraying none of the fury simmering beneath her calm exterior. She knew the mission was inevitable, but that didn't make it any easier. Humanity had just become another pawn in a cosmic chess game, and no one cared who got sacrificed in the process. The transmission cut out abruptly, and Mira felt the weight of the galaxy settle on her shoulders. She had made it this far, despite all odds. But now, the very fabric of humanity's place in the galaxy was at stake. Jax, prep the ship for immediate jump, Mira ordered, turning back to the console, her mind already calculating the quickest route to the rogue faction's location. This isn't just another mission. It's about something much bigger than us. Aye, Captain, Jack said, his voice tight but respectful. He moved swiftly to his station, the crew now beginning to sense the tension in the air. Tell the crew to prepare for action. We're going to show the galaxy what humans are capable of. Mira's voice held a fire that even she hadn't expected. The elite might have banned humans from combat, but they hadn't stopped Mira from being a warrior. As the vanguard surged into hyperspace, Mira allowed herself a moment of reflection. The decision she was about to make wasn't just about following orders. It was about defining humanity's future. Was the galaxy right to fear them, or was this a mistake they would all regret? The ship hurtled toward the rogue faction, and Mira's mind raced with possibilities. She wasn't going to just stop them. She was going to show the galaxy what it meant to face a human soldier who had been denied his place. This was no longer just a mission. This was a declaration. And when the time came, the galaxy would know that the ban on humanity would not be the end. It would be the spark that lit the fire. Mira took a deep breath, her violet eyes flashing with resolve. She turned to Jax, a flicker of determination passing over her face. Ready the weapons. We're going in hot. The soft hum of the engines was a constant presence, a reminder that Mira and her crew were now deep within enemy territory. The cold, metallic walls of the Vanguard felt less like the heart of a ship and more like the confines of a cage, trapping them all in a mission they didn't entirely understand. Mira stood at the front of the bridge, eyes fixed on the swirling expanse of stars beyond the viewport. The rogue faction's location was just ahead, an asteroid belt of jagged rock and scattered debris, a perfect hiding place for those who had decided to break the galactic elite's laws. The mission had started simple enough. A breach. A few rogue humans who had decided that they would no longer wait for the elites to decide their fate. But now, as Mira felt the weight of the crew's gaze on her back, she knew this wasn't just a mission to stop a rebellion. This was the beginning of a war against a system that had turned its back on humanity. Captain! Jax's voice broke her concentration, and she turned to face him. His usual confidence had been replaced by an air of uncertainty, his brow furrowed as he studied the incoming data on his console. What is it? Mira asked, her voice steady, masking the rising tension in her chest. We've detected movement in the asteroid field, Jax said, pointing to the holographic map that glowed in the center of the room. They're out there, Captain. And they're armed. The crew stirred, their unease palpable. There was a sharp tension in the air, a sense that the mission was slipping away from them. Mira had always led from the front, but this time, the stakes were higher than they had ever been before. This wasn't just about humanity's survival. It was about proving that they were still a force to be reckoned with. She walked over to Jax's console, staring at the shifting patterns of blips on the screen. The rogue faction was moving fast, and Mira could sense the desperation in their actions. Lock onto their coordinates, she ordered. We're going in. Aye, Captain, Jax replied, though his voice lacked the usual fire. He was beginning to understand the gravity of the situation, just as Mira had. The mission was no longer just about stopping a rogue faction. It was about challenging everything the galactic elite had come to believe about humans. It was a chance to prove that they still had a place in the galaxy. As the Vanguard entered the asteroid belt, the ship's shields flickered, the hum of the engines becoming louder as they navigated through the dense rock field. Mira could feel her pulse quicken, her fingers twitching over the command console. She wasn't just the captain now. She was the symbol of humanity's fight to retain its place in the galaxy. Shields at 90%, Jax reported, his voice sharp. We're not going to make it through this without taking some damage. I know, Mira replied, her voice steady. She was used to the pressure, used to the feeling of everything hanging in the balance. She had always been willing to risk it all, but this time, the stakes felt different. The entire future of humanity was on the line. Suddenly, the ship shuddered, and Mira's heart skipped a beat. A warning light flashed across the control panel. Incoming fire. Evasive maneuvers! Mira barked, and Jax immediately began pulling at the controls, sending the Vanguard veering to the left, narrowly avoiding a blast of energy that ripped through the space where they had just been. Return fire! Mira shouted, her voice a mix of fury and command. Firing on their position now, Jack said, his fingers flying across the console as he targeted the rogue ships hiding among the asteroids. The first volley of shots rang out, striking the lead ship and sending it spiraling into the rocks. The ship exploded in a burst of fire and debris, a clear warning shot. But Mira knew this was only the beginning. Captain! Lieutenant Reed's voice cut through the chaos. We've got multiple contacts coming in. They're not just rogue humans. There's something else, something bigger. Mira's stomach sank. She had suspected as much. The rogue faction wasn't just any group of rebels. They had found something that the galactic elite feared. And now, that something was on their tail. Jax, get us out of here, Mira commanded, her voice sharp with urgency. Plot a course to the nearest safe zone. We can't outrun them, Captain, Jax replied, his hands working desperately over the controls. Not with these ships on our tail. Mira clenched her jaw, every decision weighing heavier than the last. She couldn't run. They couldn't hide. The mission had changed the moment those rogue ships opened fire. They were no longer just upholding the elite's ban, they were fighting for humanity's place in this galaxy. A violent shudder racked the ship as another blast hit their shields, sending sparks cascading across the bridge. Reed gripped the side of his station to steady himself as the ship lurched again. We need to fight back, Captain, Reed urged, his voice strained. Mira's eyes locked onto the screen, where the rogue ships were closing in. The situation was quickly spiraling out of control. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and the only thing they had left was their will to survive. We fight, she said, her voice calm but filled with an intensity that rang through every crew member. We show them that humans don't back down. We'll make our stand here. We're not running from anyone. Not now, not ever. The crew's faces hardened, resolve burning in their eyes. The time for hesitation was over. They would fight to the last breath. For humanity. For their place in the galaxy. Prepare the weapons, Mira ordered, her fingers moving over the controls with deadly precision. Let's give them a fight they'll never forget. The ship groaned as the massive guns on the Vanguard powered up, the hum of their energy resonating through the hull. The rogue faction's ships were closing in fast, but Mira was ready. It wasn't just about the battle now. It was about sending a message to the entire galaxy. Humanity would not be silenced. With a resounding crash, the Vanguard fired its first salvo of shots. The rogue ships exploded in flashes of light and debris, but Mira knew this was only the beginning. The war they had started would only escalate from here. And it was a war they would win, no matter the cost. The asteroid belt loomed like a labyrinth of stone and shadow. Mira stood at the command console, her eyes fixed on the chaos unfolding before her. The battle had been raging for hours, and the rogue faction wasn't backing down. Every strike they launched felt like it was aimed not just at the Vanguard, but at everything humanity stood for in this galaxy. Shields are at 30%, Captain. Jax's voice was taut, his fingers working furiously over the controls. We're losing ground. If we don't get out of here, we'll be a floating corpse in the stars. Mira's hand tightened around the edge of the console, her knuckles white. The crew's faces, once full of defiance, were now shadowed with the reality of their situation. The rogue ships, relentless and cold, had begun to surround them, cutting off any escape route. All hands brace for impact. Mira's voice was firm, a leader who had weathered worse storms. She wasn't about to let this be the end, not without a fight. Captain? Reed shouted, his voice cutting through the tension. There's something on their lead ship. It's not human. Mira's pulse quickened, her mind racing. She had expected them to fight with desperation, but this? This was different. What are you saying, Lieutenant? Reed looked up from his console, his face pale. The signatures, they don't match any known human technology. It's alien. A chill ran down Mira's spine. The rogue faction wasn't just defying the ban, they had something else. Something bigger. Something that could change the course of this war. Jax looked up, his expression haunted. We need to take it out, now, or we won't make it through this. The rogue ship's weaponry flared once more, and the Vanguard rocked as another blast tore into its hull. Mira steadied herself, taking a deep breath. Her decision was clear. Jax, get us close to that ship. Reed, prep the fighters. We're not running, we're hitting them where it hurts. The crew sprang into action, moving with a precision born of training and desperation. Mira's eyes scanned the view ahead, watching as the rogue ships tightened their formation, preparing for their next strike. But Mira wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. She'd spent her entire life fighting for humanity's place in the stars. She wasn't about to let a few rogue ships, no matter how advanced, decide the fate of her people. We're moving in, Mira said, her voice low and determined. She turned to Jax, who was already guiding the Vanguard toward the lead rogue ship. Stay sharp. We don't know what we're dealing with here. The ship lurched forward, the engines roaring to life as the Vanguard accelerated. Mira's grip tightened on the console. The rogue ships were closing in fast. Her heart raced in her chest. Every second of this felt like an eternity. She could feel the weight of the crew's trust on her shoulders. This wasn't just a battle, it was a test of everything they had fought for. Fighters are ready, Captain, Reed called, his voice steady but tinged with urgency. Launch them, Mira ordered, her eyes locked onto the alien ship. We'll hit them hard and fast. The fighters shot out from the hangar, swarming toward the rogue ships in a chaotic dance of fire and fury. Mira watched as the smaller vessels weaved through the asteroid field, targeting the enemy with deadly precision. But the rogue faction wasn't giving up easily. They retaliated with unrelenting force, sending beams of energy cutting through the fighters like a hot knife through butter. Explosions lit up the void, debris scattering like fireworks against the dark backdrop of space. Mira's stomach churned as she watched the destruction unfold. We can't take much more of this, Jack said, his voice tight with strain. We need to disable that lead ship, now. Mira nodded, her eyes narrowing as she focused on the alien vessel. It was massive, far larger than anything humanity had ever encountered. And it was armed to the teeth. But Mira wasn't afraid. She had seen death up close too many times to let fear hold her back now. Prepare a full strike on their engine core, Mira commanded. Let's give them everything we've got. Jax's fingers flew over the controls, his voice steady as he locked onto the target. Locking on, now. A moment of silence filled the bridge. Mira could feel her heartbeat thundering in her ears as the tension built to a crescendo. This was it. The final gamble. Firing, Jax said, his voice tight with focus. The massive guns on the Vanguard opened fire, the blasts lighting up the darkness as they streaked toward the alien ship. Mira's heart was in her throat as the shots collided with the rogue vessel's engine core, sending a shockwave through space. The enemy ship lurched, its shields flickering as it absorbed the blows. But Mira could see the damage. They had struck a vulnerable point. The rogue ship's movements became erratic, and Mira knew they had a brief window of opportunity. All fighters, press the attack! Mira barked, her voice carrying the weight of command. Do not let up! The remaining fighters rallied around the Vanguard, their weapons unleashing a barrage of fire as they took advantage of the alien ship's weakened state. Mira could feel the energy of the battle shifting, the tide beginning to turn in their favor. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Captain, they're retreating! Jack shouted, a note of disbelief in his voice. Mira didn't allow herself a moment of relief. The rogue faction might be pulling back, but this battle had just revealed something far more dangerous than she had anticipated. Whoever, or whatever, was behind the rogue faction had a power that could rival the galactic elite. This was no longer about a few rebellious humans. This isn't over, Mira said, her voice low but resolute. We've just uncovered something much bigger. Get us back to the fleet. We need to report this, now. The ship began to turn, the damage to the Vanguard already taking its toll. But Mira didn't care. The fight was far from over. They had taken a huge step forward, but there were still questions to answer. As the rogue ships retreated into the darkness, Mira allowed herself one last glance at the destruction in their wake. This was just the beginning of something much larger. A war that would define humanity's future. And she would be at the center of it, leading them into the unknown. Set a course, Mira said, her voice determined. The galaxy isn't ready for what's coming next. The stars streaked by in a blur as the vanguard cut through the vastness of space, the adrenaline from the battle still coursing through Mira's veins. The ship was battered, its hull scarred with the remnants of enemy fire, but it still held together, just barely. Her crew, weary but resolute, worked in tense silence as they set their course back to the fleet. Mira stood at the bridge's edge, staring out into the black void. The battle had been won, but it felt like a hollow victory. The rogue ships had retreated, but their mission was far from over. The battle had revealed more than Mira had expected, something far more dangerous, something no one had anticipated. A signal from the fleet broke her thoughts. Admiral Kessler's face appeared on the screen, his expression stern. Captain Sato, report. Mira took a breath, straightening. She could already hear the weight of the Admiral's voice, the unsaid judgment in every word. Admiral, the rogue faction has been repelled. We've sustained heavy damage, but we're holding. Damage reports? Kessler asked, his eyes narrowing as he reviewed the data sent through. The shields are down to 15%, and several of our forward weapons systems are offline. But we'll make it back. Mira's voice was firm, yet there was an edge of uncertainty in it. She knew this wasn't just about the damage they'd taken. It was about what lay beneath the surface of this battle. Kessler's eyes darkened as he processed the information. Understood, Captain? Get back here as soon as you can. We need to discuss the implications of this breach. Mira stiffened, sensing the undertone of the Admiral's words. This was no longer about the fight itself. What do you mean, Admiral? She asked, her voice edged with suspicion. We've intercepted a few transmissions. This rogue faction wasn't just a random group of rebels. They've been in contact with someone. Someone with access to advanced technology, and it's not human. Mira felt a cold knot form in her stomach. Who are they in contact with? The Admiral hesitated, glancing off-screen. We're not sure yet. But there's something more going on here. A bigger force at play. Mira didn't need to hear more. She knew it wasn't just about the rogue faction anymore. This was a prelude to something far worse. We'll be there shortly, Admiral. Mira replied, cutting the communication. Her hands clenched into fists, her thoughts racing. Jax's voice broke the silence, his tone filled with concern. Captain, we've detected an anomaly. Something's coming in fast. Mira turned sharply, her gaze locked onto the sensor display. A strange, irregular shape was emerging from the far reaches of the system, closing in at an alarming rate. It wasn't like any ship she had ever seen. Its sleek, dark outline shimmered as if it were something alien. Not just technologically advanced, but otherworldly. What in the hell is that? Jax whispered, as the object grew larger on the screen. Reed, who had been monitoring the scanners, looked up, his face drained of color. It's not just a ship, Captain. It's... Before he could finish, the unknown vessel fired. A massive burst of energy shot through space, striking the Vanguard in a blinding flash. The impact sent Mira flying backward, her body slamming into the command chair. The whole ship trembled, alarms screaming across the bridge. Shields down to 3%. Hull integrity critical. Jax shouted, struggling to regain control of the ship. Mira coughed, forcing herself back to her feet. She gripped the chair, her mind racing. This was the enemy. This was what they had feared. No ordinary rogue faction could command a ship with this kind of firepower. This was a message, and the message was clear. Get us out of here, Jax. Mira ordered, but even as the words left her mouth, she knew it was too late. Captain, Reed said urgently. The vessel is communicating. It's a direct transmission. Mira turned sharply, fury boiling in her veins. Put it through. The screen flickered to life, revealing a figure cloaked in darkness. Its features were obscured by a holographic mask, its voice cold and mechanical. We are the Ascendant Collective, the voice intoned, reverberating with authority. You have shown resilience, Captain Sato. But it will not be enough. Mira's heart pounded as she fought to keep her voice steady. Who are you? What do you want? The figure's laughter echoed through the bridge, chilling and detached. What do we want? It is not what you want, human. It is what you need. You are but a seed in a vast galaxy, struggling to grow. We have watched your kind, and you have only shown us your rage. Mira's breath caught in her throat. She had heard whispers of the Ascendant Collective, an enigmatic group that had quietly observed the galaxy's power struggles from the shadows. No one had ever been able to confirm their existence, but now there was no denying it. You won't survive this, the voice continued. You will bow to us, or you will burn. Mira's mind raced. She couldn't afford to back down. Not now. Not after everything humanity had fought for. You don't know who you're dealing with, she snapped. We're not going to bow to anyone. We'll fight. The figure's eyes flickered, as if amused. We shall see, Captain Sato. We shall see. With a flash, the transmission ended. Mira stood frozen, the weight of the situation crashing down on her. The Ascendant Collective had shown their hand. And they were not interested in peace. Jax, Mira said, her voice firm. Prepare to jump? We're going back to the fleet now. Jax's fingers flew over the console, but the tension in his shoulders was evident. Captain, the damage is too severe. We won't make it far with the current state of the ship. We don't have a choice, Mira replied, her eyes narrowing. We go, or we die trying. The ship lurched as Jax initiated the jump sequence, the engines sputtering under the strain. For a moment, Mira thought they might not make it. But then, with a violent shudder, the Vanguard shot forward, and the stars exploded into streaks of light as they entered hyperspace. Mira slumped back into her seat, her mind reeling. The Ascendant Collective had made their move. But this wasn't the end. No, it was only the beginning. As the ship hurtled through the void, Mira clenched her fists. Humanity was about to face a war unlike any they had ever known. And this time, there would be no backing down. She wouldn't let them fall. Not without a fight. The end? No, not yet. The real fight was only just beginning.